Hello, in this video I'll be playing through episode 7 of Interrogation You Will Be Deceived, illustrating how I can get a confession and win the episode, hopefully without having to resort to any sort of enhanced interrogation techniques. This video is intended to help you if you're stuck, but I strongly suggest you stop the video once you feel you have what you need to finish the conversational puzzle on your own, so that you don't ruin your own experience of the game. There are many ways to finish an episode and I will only be showing you one of them, so try to get back in the game and discover your own. Let's start with the case before us. In episode 7, we're following up with the information Linda Bailey has provided about a bomb being planted at a weapons plant. Unfortunately for us, we don't have much to go on as the factory has been put on lockdown with all the employees being already evacuated when we got there. Apparently, the cybersecurity of the factory has been breached and a lockdown has been initiated, a lockdown that not even the security experts employed by the factory can understand what happened. So our objective here is to break this lockdown or find some way to break this lockdown, defuse the bomb, and make sure that this factory doesn't blow up. So to assist us with that, we have three very interesting people. First of all, we have Aaron King, who is the founder and the majority shareholder of the company that owns the facility. He is a well-known entrepreneur. He's very rich and very influential in the city, and he's the one that essentially built this business, right? So he is the one that owns this place. He could give us some interesting insights into how the cybersecurity works, perhaps. Secondly, we have Steve Muradin. He's the chief of security of the factory. It's just obvious that we should be working with him. This is less so a person that we're interrogating per se. We could just be asking him here for help, but he's also one of the people that could have had the sort of security access needed to ensure this sort of lockdown. Thirdly, we have our very own Tab. Now Tab is here because before she worked with us, she worked as a security auditor, and one of her audits was made at this factory, which means that she might have had access to the back-end security of this factory, and she's one of the only people we know that could have possibly done this. So these are our three people. None of them have a direct motive for doing this, so this will be very difficult to do, but we'll go through it. Let's bring them in. You'll see that this is a timed episode. Although we have a lot of time, we have to be very careful what we ask. So the first thing we want to do is introduce ourselves to all the suspects here. I will go in this run for an empathy strategy, so I'll try to be polite, I'll try to be kind, and I'll try to make each suspect believe I'm on their side. So let's start with Mr. King. Let's be nice with him, tell him we're here to do the job. Do the same with Muradin. We're working with a professional. Very happy with that. And Tab, I'm very sorry we have to do this with you. The first thing we want to do is understand how these security codes even work, right? So let's discuss the situation with Tab. Let's see how do these security codes even work. And let's ask her just that. And she tells us it's a multi-key code stored on multiple physical devices. Now in the real world, that's a very real thing. This is how the most secure digital locks work. There's a physical element to it stored in multiple places. So this makes sense. It's probably not a lie. Let's see who could have had access. And she tells us the factory owner and the chief of security are the only ones that held the codes on a permanent basis. So this is Aaron King and Steve Muradin right here. But she admits also the auditor would have had access for a limited time when she did the audit. So Tab could have had the access. Okay, but let's see if there's any way to circumvent this in Tab's opinion as the security auditor. And she tells us that it could have been only been circumvented using the access codes of one of these three people, and because there are no access logs, someone must have created a backdoor, right? So what she tells us is because no one logged the use of a security key, that means someone else had a way to get in here, right? Through a backdoor. Now, Tab could have put the backdoor in when she audited the place. Moradin could have done this as he worked there for years, or King could have done this as he built up the place. So let's ask each one of them what their opinion on this is. So let's discuss the situation. Let's discuss the access codes. And he just tells us he doesn't want to talk with us about that. That's private information. It's alright. We just want to know this so that we can save your factory and your job, you know? Let's see how strongly he believes in the encryption. And he says it's unlikely that anyone could ever break the encryption. So this links up with what Tab says, right? If we have no logs of any keys being used, and he tells us there's no way to break the encryption, then the theory that there's a backdoor created is that already established is the most likely one. Let's see if he confirms who had access to the memory sticks, and he congratulates us for the job well done. We see we've done our research. We just talked to Tab. We rely on Tab very much. He admits he has one, King has one, and the auditor has one. So this is confirmed at this point. All three could have had access to this. Let's ask him about a backdoor. And he says that he knows no backdoor was built at the start, and he should know this. But he says that someone with access could have built one afterwards. Now I don't understand how that cybersecurity works, but I'm gonna try and believe him. Let's see what King thinks about this. Let's see what he thinks about the current situation and about the access codes. He tells us that he's no expert. Well, after our discussions, we're kind of an expert, so let's tell him that we're just trying to make sure his memory stick has not been compromised. This shows that we know we're informed of the situation, but we're not putting any pressure on him. He says, yeah, sure. And let's ask him about the back door. He smiles and says that maybe he should have installed. Let's tell him that even if he did, there's nothing wrong with that. And he looks worried, saying he doesn't know what we're talking about. So at this point, this tells me that we have not raised our empathy or our fear enough with him for him admitting that. So let's discuss some other things with him. Let's discuss some personal things with him. Let's try to understand what sort of person we're dealing with here, since we all want that information from the security breach with him. So let's do some small talk with him about his businesses, and this is one of the interesting choices you have when it comes to how you approach King. He is obviously a very rich businessman, he's an entrepreneur, he's an industrialist. So we have here a very politically charged, four very politically charged statements, right? We can accuse the corporations, we can sustain that the corporations are meritocratic, we can talk about worker abuse, or we can talk about predatory capitalism. So these are all statements that will influence how we report with King. I will go with complimenting his capitalist view of the world, and he nods and agrees with. So at this point I know that this person is a strong capitalist, a liberal, believes in free market and all that stuff. So this is how I will approach every other conversation or every other choice I have with him, right? Trying to raise my empathy with him. Let's see what he means by never leaving a penny on the table. And he tells us that, you know, you should do the best with any financial opportunity you have. Good advice right there. What does he mean by having an exit strategy? He talks about long-term endeavors that are more profitable, so you should be able to be flexible. Well, interesting, but getting your factory blown up doesn't tell me that you're flexible anyway, it just tells me your business is under threat. Let's see how he made his wealth. So he's a man that inherited wealth, but that didn't use that wealth profitably. Okay. What other businesses does he own? He says this is his main investment. There was never any need to diversify his portfolio. Well, what makes it so profitable? Basically, he's selling guns to the government. That will always be profitable. Isn't that risky though? And he tells us that his basket, right, the business, is insured and financed by the state. So at this point, we know that even if it blows up, there's no one inside, all the workers are out. Even if it blows up, his factory is insured. So he's not gonna lose any money from this. We still have to stop this explosion because we don't want to give the win to the Liberation Front. Interesting. Let's talk more about the situation with him. See if he wants to tell us, now that we've raised our empathy with him, see if he wants to tell us about the back door. And he does. He installed the private back door. It's only natural. I mean, it's his property. He can do with it whatever he wants. So I think it makes sense. Let's just double check if he admits he did, for convenience. Interesting. Why did he keep this a secret? He just tells us he wouldn't want to bother with it. Probably Muradin would have been on his ass if Muradin knew about this. So I guess it makes sense. Who knew about this? Just him. And now us. Okay, but why did he need it? And he says he enjoys connecting remotely to the cameras and keeping an eye on the place. Okay, that's kind of creepy, but I guess if you're very passionate about your business, makes sense. So at this point, we know about Aaron King that he had a backdoor access to the factory. We know his factory is insured, so even if it blows up, he has nothing to lose. And we know he strongly empathizes with hardcore capitalist statements, right? So if we try to challenge him, he tells us that he wouldn't want to damage his own property, the one that he invested so much in. Okay, let's talk some more about his business, about him being a weapons manufacturer. He says he wouldn't attach morals to his business, so he's clearly thinking only about money here. Let's talk a bit about this. Basically what we're trying to look for is some ways to raise his empathy even more, right? Nothing here. Let's keep looking. Let's talk some more about his factory. Maybe there's something here. He says he employs hundreds of people. Interesting. Let's keep looking. His clients are governments, most likely. Let's see if his insurance covers terrorist attacks. He says absolutely. Here we can accuse him, or we can empathize with him, saying that we're glad that he'll at least be able to rebuild, and he says this is a minor setback and that they will put this back together. Let's see if he's willing to crack now, and he just admits there's too much evidence. We have him on tape saying he had the place insured against terrorist attacks, which is, I think, is a very rare thing to do. He admits he built the back door in without his security chief knowing about it, and he admits he works with the Liberation Front, and he gives us this like really big speech that just wastes our time. Let's go with our strategy, keep telling him we understand, we empathize, and let's see what he hopes to accomplish. And he says nothing really, it's just symbolism, a protest against the government and its practices when dealing with the military. Now we know King is a capitalist, he believes in the free market, he only sees the government as a customer, and we know he has no moral qualms about him being a weapons dealer. So this seems to me like a rehearsed statement, something that he says, but I don't think he actually believes, right? So let's criticize the government. And he nods, right? Let's talk about the Liberation Front a bit more. Why would he target his own factory? and he says it was the easiest target the front identified, a short-term sacrifice he had to do. So again, putting everything together, King clearly loves his business, clearly loves doing business. Although he won't lose money on this explosion, it seems to me he wouldn't have liked to have done this if he had any other alternative. So if the front identified this business, I don't think King is totally fine with this. So this is our way in, right? This is how we can leverage King, convince him that maybe there's a better way to do this. You don't have to blow up your own factory, right? And we have an option that is in line with our strategy there, telling him that people are easy to tell others to tear something down when they haven't built it themselves. And sure enough, look at our empathy here, bar raising, and he agrees with us. How long has he been working? He doesn't really keep track of that. Let's see if he believes this PR stunt will actually work. With all the discussion it will cause, it will be the only logical conclusion. Well, here we can confront him with our own knowledge. Now that in this episode, now that we've dealt with so many Liberation Front members and read so much about them, we know that Lady Luck sometimes says that violence invites interpretation and judgment. So let's try to beat this Liberation Front member with his own ideology. And he's surprised we read Lady Luck, but he still believes people will interpret this correctly. Let's see if we can convince him to stop this explosion. We know that he doesn't agree with violence. He says there's no alternative, but we know that let's try to convince him that there's another way. And now we need to offer him some sort of other way, because we're desperate. At this point, if that bomb blows up, this is just another failure on our track record, so we will most certainly get fired. So we have to somehow convince this man that there's a better way for him, or for the Liberation Front, rather than blow up that building, right? So let's try to see if we have any options from that. And he rightly tells us that us losing our job will only help the front. Here we have a deception option, right? We can tell him that our orders come from Lady Luck. And because our empathy is very high with him, he's not really willing to trust us, but you know, it doesn't seem that far-fetched to him. And we can convince him that yes, we're part of the Liberation Front and that we can prove it, right? We can give him something like this Benno vase, telling him that this is the guy we're after, right? The Liberation Front member. We can tell King that listen, I give you Benno vase and tell him we're after him and you stop this explosion. And he says he texted Benno to get away, get him a computer, and that's that. So this is how you finish episode 7. There are many other ways to do it. Thank you very much for watching.